for the NIH Biosketch and Other Support. I'm Kathy Dunn, one of the Operations and Training Officers in the Office of Sponsored Research. So today, the learning objectives that we're going to be going over is first, we're going to be aware of the changes to the NIH Biosketch and other support requirements that are going to be effective May 25th. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that effective means in a future slide. We're going to know the NIH requirements in relation to their new other support template format. We're going to try to understand, or we will understand, the supporting documents that are required for foreign support and appointments, know what types of support should be included in the different sections of the Biosketch and the other support, understand the internal process for other support, know that the PI and other key personnel must sign their respective other support documents. And finally, we're going to know how to access NIH and other support, and OSR resources, so the Office of Sponsored Research resources that will be available to you going forward. So let's just start off and ask the question, why? Why did NIH make these changes? What is this all about? And according to them, it's to align with other federal research agencies. And they're doing this based on guidance issued by the Office of Science and Technology Policy Joint Committee on Research Environment. So hopefully this is positive for us. Hopefully this means that, now Other Support and Biosketch for NIH, NSF, DOD, all of those kind of federal agencies will be more aligned and we won't have to have so many different versions. So that's really is the kind of, I think, goal is to really make things more similar between the different federal agencies. And this is NIH's first step in having that alignment. Additionally, this also is their first step to transitioning into using Science CV. We'll talk a little bit more about Science CV in future slides, and note that it's also currently used by NSF already. So when are these changes due? As it says in the title of the notice, it's for due dates on or after May 25th. What this is for applications and research performance progress reports, or RPPRs, that are submitted for due dates on or after May 25th, 2021. However, due to feedback from, I think, a lot of institutions saying that's a very fast turnaround time, they just released a new notice today. So luckily I checked right before this training and it was posted. So we have not had a chance to send this out to campus yet, but as of today, they did issue an implementation of the changes. So they still would like us to start using the new forms as of May 25th. They are encouraging it and they're hoping for it. However, they will not enforce it until January 25th, 2022. So we do have a little bit of breathing room. They're not going to withdraw applications and they're not going to send information back until January 25th, 2022. I just though want to emphasize they would like us to start using these templates as of May 25th and really start getting used to them. So the official OSR policy, the Office of Sponsored Research policy, is we will follow NIH. We will not enforce, we'll encourage, but not enforce until that January 25th deadline. All right, we're gonna jump in now and talk a little bit about the Biosketch and what changes have been made to that part of it. There are 5 key changes I'm gonna go over today. The first one is regarding Section B. They've renamed it from Position and Honors to Position, Scientific Appointment, and Honors. So they added that scientific appointments. They have, for non-fellowship biosketches, removed Section D. That was the research support section. For fellowship biosketches, Section D has been renamed to Scholastic Performance. Before it was the Scholastic Performance and Research Support. The ongoing completed research for the past 3 years, which used to make up Section D, has now been moved to within Section A. And finally, they have the updated Biosketch format in Science CV. So I'm going to go through each one of these changes now in a little bit more detail. So just setting the stage for what we'll be going over. Okay, so let's look at the first one. They've renamed the title from Position and Honors to Position, Scientific Appointments and Honors. Here is an example of what they have in their sample. They have samples for all of the changes and updated formats on their website, and I'll give you links later. So as you can see, they've just renamed it. the positions and scientific appointment should include all positions and scientific appointments, both domestic and foreign, including affiliations with foreign entities or governments. It should include titled academic, professional, or institutional appointments, whether or not remuneration is received, and whether full-time, part-time, or voluntary, including adjunct, visiting, or honorary. So it really needs to be kind of any type of position or appointment needs to be included. I believe this has kind of always been NIH's intent. They're just now making it extra clear by doing a name change. So this might not actually require you to make any changes to your biosketch or for the faculty to make any changes to their biosketch. It's more really NIH emphasizing the type of information they want included. So for section D, for non-fellowship biosketches, as I mentioned, section D has just been removed. For fellowship biosketches, they still want the scholastics performance. So here's just a screenshot from a sample of a fellowship biosketch. Obviously, there's nothing to show for the non-fellowship because it's just blank, but here is kind of an example of what they want. So section D is gone for non-fellowship. There for fellowship, please definitely make sure you're using the correct template. If you are doing a fellowship, they have pre and postdoc. So that section D that's been removed has actually just been moved into section A. So here is an example of section A, the personal statement. That part has not changed. So the first part of section A is the same as it was before. You're doing a personal statement that kind of briefly describes your qualifications and your role on the project. Now, though, at the end of that section, you can include ongoing and recently completed projects. Recently completed means up to 3 years. And it's only ones that you want to highlight. So you do not need to include every single research project or every single award for the faculty or the PI, but it's ones they really want to emphasize and highlight because it is relevant to the current project. You don't need to have effort listed. You don't need to have costs listed. It is just kind of the information about that award as kind of represented here. This is once again a screenshot from the sample that they've given. So you'll have professional statement first, then the ongoing and completed research, and then underneath that up to 4 citations that you wish to include. That is the citations is the same as the biosketches now. So really all they've done is they've taken section D and moved it into part of section A. And I think they really want to emphasize that it's only projects you want to highlight. That's actually always been the policy, but I don't know if that's always been very pronounced or clear. So I think NIH is really trying to emphasize that it's really only ones you want to highlight. It does not need to be exhaustive of all of your ongoing or completed projects. So now the updated biosketch format is available in Science CV. Here's just the login screen for Science CV. You can log in with your Area Commons account or NSF account. Once you get into Science CV, there's an opportunity to create a new document. And you can see these are the different formats they have now available. So they do have the new NIH biosketch format, as well as the old one, as well as some kind of NSF. When you go in there, you either can start with a blank document or you can go from an existing document. So if you have an existing biosketch in there, that's an older version, you can select that, or you can also pull in information from other sources. Once you then create the document, either new or from existing, it'll allow you to go in and edit it. On that edit screen at the very top, there is a link to the instructions. So if there are questions about what needs to be included in a section or what needs to be filled out, it does provide a direct link to the instructions. Then it has a spot where you can go in and edit each individual section. So you can see it does match the sections that are on the biosketch, and you can just go in and edit it. I want to emphasize that the link to the instructions are kind of within the form at the top when you enter it. There are some links currently on the Science CV kind of homepage that has like help guides and tutorials. For now, that seems to be just for the old NIH biosketch. It does not appear that they've updated it yet for the new biosketch format, at least not the last time I checked. So just be careful of the instructions. If you're getting the instructions directly from the form, once you go in to create the new form, that will be the updated instructions. So just be careful if you're looking at old videos. I also wanted to point out that faculty or PIs can add a delegate. So if they have a department administrator, a lab manager, somebody in their lab that typically helps them with their biosketches, or some type of administrative support they have that helps them with their biosketches, they can go in and add them as a delegate. Up at the top under the login, so there's like your profile information at the top of the screen. If you click on that, there is then a delegation spot on the resulting screen where you just can go and add a delegate. That delegate will be added not only to kind of help with the science CV, but also with the bibliographies. The science CV is linked to MyNCBI. So if you have faculty, or if you yourself are currently using MyNCBI to manage your bibliography, all of that will link up. And then when you're creating your biosketches, you can pull the citations from the same source as your bibliography. So it's kind of a great way to kind of have those things linked. And then you can have delegates that kind of help both with your managing your bibliography, or as it says here, and or your science CV profiles. So I just want us to take a step back and think a little bit about what we're doing. And I actually have, before we get into kind of this poll, I want to first kind of get us used to the polls and what that all is. So I'm going to start with just an introduction poll that I'm going to share out. So you should get something popping up on your screen in just a minute that's asking what your role is in research administration, or in research, because you could be a faculty researcher. So I just want to know if you are pre-award, post-award, or kind of faculty or a researcher, just so we can get a feel for the people that are on the call. And if you are both pre-award and post-award, I'm sorry, I guess that is not an option. I have looked a little bit at the chat. Just pick what your dominant role is. Okay, I'm ending the polling, and I'm going to share the results. Most of the people on, we have a lot of post-award, and then next highest is pre-award, and then faculty. I think that makes sense just based on the number of staff members we have in each of these roles too here at UCSF. All right. Okay, great. Now that we know how the polling works and we are really great at responding, I'm now gonna do a scenario that I'm gonna have you kind of think about, and then we're gonna do another poll on. So this is the scenario. I can click to advance my slide. So let's imagine Dr. Chen is a consultant for the women's U.S. soccer team advising on concussion protocols. This is separate from the research she conducts at UCSF. There's no research activities related to the consulting agreement. Does this belong on their biosketch? Does it belong on Dr. Chen's biosketch? If yes, which section of the biosketch should it go? So I am going to launch the poll now, and it basically, the poll is going to give you the option of saying no, and then yes, and a specific section. So if you think yes, tell me which section. Okay, ending the polling. Okay, we got a little bit of a mixture between no and yes. Those who said yes, the majority said the position, scientific appointment, and honors, a few with the personal statement, and a few with the contribution to science. Okay, so my answer would be, just what you're going to hear now, is yes, it does need to belong on. NIH wants all positions. A consultant is a position. If you had, I can show the example again later, but in the example they have, they do list consultant appointments on their biosketch example. So even though it's not necessarily research related, it's still a position that they have, and it's still a role. So I would say yes, include it in the positions, scientific appointments, and honors. Now, if the faculty member wants to discuss that consulting position in their personal statement because they feel it's relevant to the current project they're applying for and would speak to their expertise, they could theoretically talk about it in the section A. But because there's no actual research support, it shouldn't go in the ongoing completed research support section of A. And then as for C, the contributions to science, that's more where you're putting kind of projects that you've published and have contributions. Theoretically, if there is some type of result that had come from this consulting, it could go there. But the one place I would put it would be in the positions, scientific appointments, and honors. The examples, like I said, NIH's examples do show consultants on their sample. I also want to note that in many cases, if there is this outside consulting going on, then the faculty also should be reporting this in the OAT system. That's the outside activities tracking system that's controlled by the academic affairs group as outside activity. So all outside activity that's conducted by our faculty do need to be reported through that OAT system. So if you have any questions about that, really that's should be directed to academic affairs, and I have some information later on. But I just want you to keep in mind, the faculty in particular, if you are putting something on your biosketch, that should also be a trigger for you of, have I reported this properly? If it's outside my UCSF appointment, have I properly reported this in the OATS system? Okay, second scenario. Dr. Anderson has a joint appointment as a CZ BioHub investigator. This BioHub provides startup funds to Dr. Anderson. Does this belong on their biosketch? If yes, which section? So I'm going to launch the poll again. Right, I'm going to end the poll. So the majority of you did say yes, it should go in the positions, scientific appointments, and honors. And then we had a little bit for the other sections. I'm going to once again say yes, it should go in the position, scientific appointments, and honors. This is an appointment that should go in section B and stated out. If they are receiving an additional research support, so to be honest, I'm not 100% familiar with all the different ways of being a CC BioHub, but I do know that the CC BioHub also sends and gives out some awards. So if a person also receives research support that's kind of a separate, or just receives separate from this scenario, if they do receive research support, then that could be included in section A if so desired. I'm going to do one more poll. Dr. Jackson has a visiting lecturer position at Peking University. He does not receive a salary and there's no effort commitment. Typically, Dr. Jackson travels to Peking University during the holiday breaks for 3 weeks and gives multiple scientific lectures regarding just the general state of ALS research. Travel is covered and he receives an honorarium. Does this belong on the biosketch? If yes, which section? Let me launch the poll. Right, a majority once again said yes, it should go on section B, positions, scientific appointments, and honors. And I'm going to agree, and I'm going to say yes, I agree the same thing. So once again, NIH specifically called out if it's a visiting, if it's lecture, if it's adjunct, all of those positions, they still want to be on the biosketch, and all domestic and foreign. So I would definitely include this on the biosketch in the scientific, in section B. And then once again, this may be required to be, and should be required to report in OATS if there's any type of outside activity that needs to be in the OATS system. Right, here are just some resources for the biosketch. We have all of these will be also posted on our website, osr.ucsf.edu. You can also just search for Biosketch on that page. I just want to let you know the NIH Biosketch page has instructions and a sample, as well as FAQs. On our website, we do have a presentation that Dr. Ruth Greenblatt gave. This was back in 2015, so it's not for the new format, but it was for the new format in 2015, and there's not that many changes. So if you just want to have some general tips on how to, fill out a biosketch, I still think there's some helpful tips to that. And we will be adding more to our website as we develop more training material. If you have any questions about OATS, they have their own website. You can also just Google UCSF OATS. And I also want to point out conflict of interest. So I did not mention that in my scenarios, but in the scenarios where there's outside activity or you're receiving support from an outside entity, all of those also may need to be disclosed as part of the annual conflict of interest disclosures. So definitely faculty should keep in mind, what goes on their Biosketch might also need to be going to OATS, might also need to be going to conflict of interest. It's kind of, yes, you're having to kind of report the same thing in multiple places, but this is part of some of the federal requirements. So you really want to make sure you're thinking broadly about where you need to report these activities. I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to see if Joyce, Cassie, if you think there are any questions I should be addressing now before I move on from the Biosketch.
Kathy, there is actually one question.
Okay.
When they ask for all positions, scientific appointments, and honors, are they asking for all current ones or all including past ones that are complete or done?
I think all, including past ones, because they actually want you to list them in reverse chronological order and actually put the dates of when they're done. I'm going to just quickly go back to the sample. I think that's helpful. So you see here how they have it listed. So they have like what's currently present that they're still part of. And then here are kind of some of the old ones. And you see some are still present. So they list them in reverse chronological order based on the first year. So some of these things have ended, and some of them are still present. But you can see they've got consultant, they have board of advisors, they have a lecturer. So here they've, got multiple different positions. So it is all. Anything else? And if we don't address it here, we can address it at the end. And then I know also Joyce and Cassie are trying to answer questions kind of within the chat if possible.
Kathy, there is a follow-up to that one. And
Okay.
Is that in section B for honors and other, should they be all, or is the last 5 years or selected acceptable? And then I will answer the page limit is still 5 pages.
Yeah, the page limit is still 5. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. Maybe Cassie or Joyce, if you have a minute, you can pull up the instructions. I can't do it right now. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, if it's just the last 5 years or ones you want to present for honors. I mean, I know they really want to know positions, but for the honors, I don't know the answer to that. And there is, yes, still a 5-page maximum.
Kathy, there's a question with regard to the visiting scholar scenario. If travel is not covered and no honorarium is paid, would it still need to be on the Biosketch?
I would say for the Biosketch, yes, because even if they're not receiving anything, if they have like an appointment or a title, if they're called, if they're like officially given a visiting scholar title, I would still include it. If they are not given a title and they're just traveling there, and while they're there giving a talk and they're not getting paid, then no. But if the other entity bestows upon them some type of title, then yes, I would include it.
Kathy, there's another question with regard to advance. So will they be using or updating the new format, or are they going to try to import the information?
Great, thank you, Joyce. Yes, for those of you who don't know what Advance is, that is an internal UCSF system where faculty go to put their CV in, and right now it can generate the NIH Biosketch. I have spoken to the people who control Advance. They are now aware of this new format. They will implement the new format into Advance. They will probably not have it ready by the May 25th date, but they will have it before the January where it starts to be enforced. I did also have a discussion with them about NIH's push to be using Science CV. So they are very aware that it would be inconvenient to have to be doing multiple systems like Science CV and then Advance separately. So they are going to look into hopefully being able to connect the systems, or at least pull information from Science CV and put it into Advance so there doesn't have to be any duplication. I think that's very early stages, but it is on the Advance team's radar, and they will start looking into those possibilities. Yeah. Anything else? Sorry, now I can have to see my animation all over again. Okay, we're going to be moving on to other support now. So what is other support? Sorry, I like this little figure. What is other support? So this is not new. This is the same definition. It's all financial resources, whether federal, non-federal, commercial, or institutional, available in direct support of an individual's research endeavor, including but not limited to research grants, cooperative agreements, contracts, and or institutional awards. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper. So what can we exclude from other support? Let's start with that. So it does not include training awards, prizes, or gifts. Reminder that NIH's definition of a gift is resources provided where there is no expectation of anything. So for example, time, service, specific research activities, money designated for something. So that's their definition of gifts. So if just because a sponsor calls it a gift, or it gets processed as a gift, if there is any type of time commitment or any other type of specified commitment, then that would need to be included on other support. If it's a true gift by NIH's definition, then no, it does not. NIH has also clarified that startup costs do not need to be included, as well, or startup support, sorry, and shared facilities or core equipment. So things that are not to an individual, but shared across a group or across the institution, do not need to be included in other support. Caveat to that, if you are using that shared facility or equipment for the proposal that you're submitting, it should be in the facilities and resources section, but it does not need to go on other support. And the clarification for these were from the NIH FAQs, questions number 16 and 21, at least how they're posted now on their website. For those with experience with NIH, they have the tendency to remove and add questions to their FAQs without really much notification. So what it currently is. So what is included? So this is what we don't have to include. What do we have to include? All foreign and domestic entities. So it's not just research or support that's coming through UCSF. If the faculty does have a joint appointment, or they have outside activities that they're receiving research support outside of UCSF, that does need to be included on the other support document. Any financial support for laboratory personnel, and provisions of high value materials that are not freely available, and they give some examples. So anything that really is providing support to the research, even if there's no, even if it's not dollar amount, those still need to be included. And we're gonna go through this in a little bit more detail. So what, or why are we doing other support? So NIH reviews to ensure that there's sufficient levels of effort are committed to the project. They're determining that there is scientific and budgetary or commitment overlap, and that only funds necessary to the approved project are included in the award. My apologies. Okay, so this is kind of the standard of what they've been reviewing up until now. There's not really a change. However, they have now are emphasizing that they're also reviewing for all resources, domestic or foreign, directly supporting the individual's research endeavors have been reported. So they're going to be looking now to make sure we have fully reported everything we're supposed to be reporting on the other support. And they also have emphasized that they're now going to be making sure that any foreign resources that meet the definition of foreign component have received appropriate prior approval. So these are things that I think they have been reviewing for before, but they now are more explicitly stating that in what they are looking for in other support. So that's a little bit new from what we've seen in the past. So let's dive a little bit deeper on what they're talking about for foreign component. What is a foreign component? NIH's definition of foreign component is the performance of any significant scientific element or segment of a project outside of the US. So either by the recipient or by a researcher employed by a foreign organization, whether or not grant funds are expended. So it's any portion of the project happening in a foreign location that is a foreign component. The standard that we think about is a subrecipient to a foreign entity. those we know about, but there are some other examples. So they give extensive travel for data collection, surveying, sampling, or similar activities could meet the definition. Even informal collaborations with investigators at a foreign site can meet that definition. And any activity anticipated in resulting in co-authorship may be significant activity. So if the foreign component is part of the foreign component is actually a portion of the research project that's happening in a foreign country. It requires prior approval, so it needs to either be as part of the proposal, so it should be clearly spelled out as part of the proposal, and then if the proposal gets awarded and there's nothing in the notice of award specifically excluding it, then that's the approval. If it was not a part of the original proposal, then a separate prior approval request has to be submitted in order to add this foreign component. So this is not actually other support. So it doesn't belong on the other support page. What it belongs on is either part of the application or a separate prior approval where we submit that prior approval and we get a revised notice of award that approves this new foreign component. When they talk about they're reviewing the other support to ensure that foreign components have been prior approved, I think they're going to look to see if we're including something on other support that really should have been part of the proposal or really should have been part of a prior approval request, and making sure we've done that correctly. So if the foreign component, so especially like informal collaborations with investigators at a foreign site, if there's some type of, we're not sending a subcontract out to a foreign site, but the PI is traveling or goes over there and does some work and they're going to be a co-author and it's the same project that's being supported by NIH, that should have been part of the original proposal, or we should have gotten prior approval to add that to the project. The only time that should be on other support is if they're having these collaborations and it's for a research project that is totally separate from the NIH project. That would still be other support and still should go on there. And that doesn't need prior approval if it's completely separate from the NIH project. But if it overlaps or it's part of the NIH project, then that is not technically other support. That is a component of the research project and needs prior approval. All right, so none of that is actually new. All of that was part of how other support has always been. They maybe are emphasizing things in a slightly different way, but that is NIH's other support kind of policy already. So what are the changes that were just announced in this new guidelines? First, they now have official separation of the project proposal section versus an in-kind section. And once again, we're going to go through all of these in more detail in the future slides. Wants to be providing active, pending, and completed within the past 3 years. That is new. In the past, we've had a just-in-time version of other support that was active and pending, and then we had an RPPR version of other support that was active and inactive, which was just things that had ended within the last year. So that's no longer part of the policy. Now it's active, pending, and completed within the last 3 years. So that's new. Reporting total award amount with indirect costs. Reporting calendar months per budget period for the entire project. Supporting documentation for foreign support and appointments. And signature of, an E got deleted by accident, of each PDPI and senior key personnel. And submit, update other support if undisclosed support is discovered. So as I said, we're going to go through each of these now in more detail, starting with looking at the project and proposal section. And this slide is actually going to be quite a few of the changes. So this is now looking at the new formatted page. NIH has blank kind of formatted page available on their website. They have instructions and they have a sample. So this is a screenshot of what the page now looks like. So the title, that's the same as it is now. Things that have asterisks are required fields, but I think the majority of the time they want you to complete all the fields. So title, no change. Major goals, that's the same as it is now, kind of a couple of sentences describing the project. Status of support, this is new. having it actually part of the entry. Once again, this is either active, pending, or completed. They still want you to group into sections based on status of the report. So you'll still have an active section, a pending section, and now a completed section. But also within each entry, you have to indicate if it's active, pending, or completed. Project number, the grant reference number, the sponsor number, name of PDPI, source of support, primary place of performance, that is new. So source of support is the sponsor, that's not new. All those three things are not new. Primary place of performance is new. The instructions say primary location where the project or activity is being executed. The example they give, though, is very general. So the example they actually give is University of California, Los Angeles. So for us, that would just be University of California, San Francisco. I don't think they need us to give like the actual performance site, like the full address. They're looking more for just broad, at least that's what it appears to be based on the sample they've provided on their website. I think they're really just trying to get at, is it happening at UCSF or somewhere else? Project proposal start and end date, that should be for the entire competitive segment. Total award costs, including indirect costs. For active, it's the total award based on what's in the notice of award. So all 5 years combined, or for the entire competitive segment, all needs to be combined.
It can be directed to us.
For pending, it's based on the proposed total costs. And for completed, it's not required. Now, for those of you who are familiar with NIH Other Support changes, they actually, in the last round of changes, told us to do total award amount, but then never really enforced it. In fact, most of the GMSs still asked us to do direct costs for a year. I have a feeling that's going to change this time. They're really emphasizing it now. I do think they're going to want total award amount, including indirects, for the entire project period. Additionally, they now want person months for the entire project period as well. So you have to give for active the level of effort in person months for the current budget period and proposed future years. So if it's the first year, you're gonna have to show all 5 years. If you're in year 2 though, or year 3, you just show year 3 and beyond. So you don't have to show like what's already been done and is no longer there. For pending, you put the proposed level of effort for each budget period based on what was in the proposal. And then for completed, it's not required to include effort amounts. So for the award amount, it's the total amount for the whole year. For the person for effort, it's current and future years. All right, I'm gonna actually pause here because this is a lot for just kind of the new format, and just see if there's any kind of specific questions just on kind of this new format.
Okay, so let me look through here and see what would be. I'm going to ask you the questions. I think many of them are relevant right now, so we'll try to stick to the format stuff. We did have some questions about what we would include. So do we, in other support, should we include clinical trials?
Yes.
Should we include, yes. Should we include HRSA training grants?
Yes. No. Well, no. If it's a HRSA training grant, if it's like a, to be honest, I'm not 100% familiar with HRSA training grants. If it's like a T32 where it's like for a training program, no, that would be like a training award, and no, would not have to be included.
Wait. On this particular question, the PDPI of the training award has measurable effort. So they've been putting it on their other support.
Well, doesn't the PDPI of a T32 have effort because they're overseeing the project?
Some do, some it all depends on the IC.
I mean, I still think we don't include those. I don't know. Maybe that's something we'll discuss and get back to you guys on. My first thought would be still no, because it's still training. And you don't have to have effort that reaches 100. I mean, sometimes people have less because they have other duties, or, you know, the 11.4.
All right.
Maybe we'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, so I'll highlight that one just for us to follow up. My understanding is the same about the training grants, the institutional training grants. What about F-32s?
We're going to do some examples later on. My first thought is no on F-32s, and we're going to talk about that later. So maybe when we get to the samples, we can dive in this into more details. I can say, though, I do feel like their guidance on what we need to include for visiting scholars and students is not 100% clear, and we have reached out to the policy people at NIH asking for some clarifications. So if we get those clarifications, we'll let you know. For now, we're going to say no to F-32s.
Yep. And I think, we'll talk about postdocs receiving fellowships from private foundations later as well. So that's another question. We have questions about shared facilities. If somebody runs a core facility and is sometimes included as a co-investigator on grants for work at that facility, do they need to include that, or does it count as shared facilities?
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, they are working at a core facility and they have effort to be at that core facility. Does that need to be included?
Run it, yes. And does that need to be included? So I guess the question is it being used for the project that the other support document is for, correct?
Yeah, I would say if they're just working there and so it's not their own research then, right? They're working in a core facility. They're really just processing other people, like they're providing a resource to other people on campus or even outside of campus sometimes, right? If there's a recharge rate where you're just working on something and then giving them the data, I would say no, because I don't think that's true research. You're performing a service. You're not the one it's not your research project. It's not your research endeavors. It's not something you're going to publish on. I would say no. I would say other support is wanting to know about your individual research endeavors, not where you're kind of working. In this case, it's more you're providing a service. And I don't think then that would need to be included. But
Kathy?
Yeah.
What about multiple component projects where a core is a core facility on that multiple component?
I would say then yes, if that core facility is directly contributing to that research project and it's for that then their research component, I would say yes. Yeah. I think it all comes down to, is the activity you're doing research where you're part of that, it's like your research, or if you're just providing a service for others, would be how I would distinguish between the two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good explanation.
And I'm going to be perfectly honest, some of these things are, it's us trying to interpret NIH policy. We're going to talk later. We have a slide later where it's like, what if you don't know? NIH says to err on the side of caution. We also can reach out to the GMS. And then there might be times too where we get pushback. I think the biggest thing is we have to be able to justify kind of why we included something or why we didn't include something. Probably more importantly, why we didn't include something, so that we can explain if we get asked about it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm trying to kind of whittle these questions through. We're getting a lot of them. This one is not technically about the format, but it kind of is. So for the RPPR, UCSF CNG was requesting a snapshot of effort from the month the OS request was made. And a notation was made on the other support stating that at this current state at the time of this request for all projects. With the new format, will we still be able to list the other support this way or not?
Well, part of the new format is you're not going to, so part of the problem with the current version of like the RPPR was it was kind of for like the next year, and yet we were submitting it during the current year. So it was kind of like, in the past, we've said do a snapshot of the effort it is right now. And so that caused a little bit of a problem when you're doing an RPPR, when you're supposed to be showing future years and right now. This kind of gets away from that a little bit in the sense that you're going to be having to show effort for all years. So now when you're submitting an RPPR, let's say we're submitting it for the end of year 2. I would say you should be entering the effort level for year 2. So kind of what we're finishing up, and then what is going to be the effort for years 3, 4, and 5. So now you kind of have to show what the proposed effort is for future years and what is kind of current right now. So that somewhat gets away from the problem we had before, because now you have to show both. So you'll show current, which I feel like should be kind of a snapshot of where you are now for the kind of current year. And then the future years are going to be what is anticipated or proposed for those future years. So that if that did not answer your question, please put more, and we can talk about this more at the end in the Q&A session.
Yes, and I have a lot more questions, so let me just kind of try to.
Well, I can keep going and I can stop again. So I can go through a few more slides and we can.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go through a few more slides. Everybody, keep your questions coming, and then when Kathy says break, try to have them all in for the moment so we can kind of get them addressed, because great questions, but we have a lot of them and I don't want to miss them.
And I do think we purposely scheduled an hour and a half. I don't have an hour worth of material, so we're definitely going to have plenty of time at the end for questions too.
And please, if you could hold back on chatting with your colleagues using the chat so we can capture all your questions.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to my next slide then, and we can still keep talking about it. And we're still going to be talking about some of it. So here actually is good because here's actually the sample from NIH. So this is just a screenshot of the sample they gave. So you can see here their primary place of performance was just University of California, Los Angeles. It was not anything more detailed than that. They gave the dates, they gave total amount, and then calendar months for all years. So this one was supposed to be like a current year. I don't have a snapshot of it, but in the sample, they did have one that was like currently in year 3. And so it only showed years 3, 4, and 5. So they do have examples of that where you don't show all of the years if it's later. Another thing that they did not have in their sample, but they did address in the Q&As is what if it is a sub-project? So what if it's a multi-component, multi-project award and you're doing the other support for an individual who's only on a portion of that sub-project? So they said in the FAQ that the recipient should provide project number and PI name for the overall project. All other information, including total award amount and persons month, should be for the sub-project only. So I did an example where maybe theoretically that person's both on project 2 and project 3. And so I provided kind of the total cost for project 2 and total cost for project 3, and then did my effort for project 2 and project 3 separately. Now, once again, they did not have an example of this on their sample, so this was my best guess of how to represent it, but I feel like this is the best way without adding too much space. If they're only on one project, then obviously you would just indicate the one project they're on and then the effort amount. The same is true for a sub-recipient. So if we're a subcontract, the FAQ indicated that we should only provide the information for our portion of the sub-award. So in this case, I've indicated it's a subcontract. I've put what the total costs were to UCSF, and then I have the effort amount. And you see in this case, I did an example where we're already in year 3, just so you can see how that would look. So here's an example for a subcontract where we're the subcontract. And this was FAQ number 18 for reference. All right, so that was the project and proposal section. Now we're gonna look at the in-kind contribution section. And so what is that? So it's really kind of external resource dollars is how we're gonna think about it. I'm sorry, external resources with no dollar amount. So office or laboratory space. So this is not like your UCSF office and laboratory space. This is if the PI is receiving extra space kind of outside of UCSF, kind of that they can use if they're traveling or if they're at another institution or something like that. Equipment, supplies, materials, employees. So this includes visiting scholars and students working in a lab supported by a domestic or foreign entity. So once again, these are all kind of outside resources where additional funds or not funds because it's no dollar amount, but additional resources are coming in that supports the research endeavors of the PI. Here is what, just to clarify a little bit, if the use of that resource is intended for the project being proposed, that actually needs to be part of the facilities and other resources or the equipment section of the application. So if you're getting, materials or samples or lab space or equipment, then that needs to be, that you're using for that project, it needs to be part of the proposal. It's only when it's not intended for the project being proposed does it get reported in the other support in this in-kind section. Here's what the new in-kind section looks like. We had already kind of adopted a separate section here at UCSF back when they made their last changes. We called it like foreign and domestic resources or something like that. So we had already kind of separated this out. But now this is NIH's official way. So we'll be following this new policy and following this new format and take away the kind of our current format. It's similar to the project proposal sections, except for now there you give the summary of the in-kind, status, primary place of performance is the same, dates are the same, and then budget, effort if available, and then estimated dollar amount. So it's for active and pending only. You do not need to do completed for the in-kind sections. In-kind resources with no associated time commitment can be listed with 0 effort, but then it must provide an estimated dollar value. So you can't have both no effort and no kind of estimated dollar value. They can't both be 0. So you have to kind of have one or the other kind of listed. I think more often than not, it would be there's no effort and there's an estimated dollar amount. So it says here it's estimated. I think really it's going to be up to the faculty member to give their best guess. They're going to be the most familiar with what they're getting and really are going to just have to do their best guess at estimating the worth of that item. Only resources uniquely available to the researcher must be reported. So this once again comes to things where it's like, if it's going to be a shared resource across the institution or shared across a whole department, that doesn't need to be reported. But if it's uniquely available to the researcher, then it must be reported on the in-kind. Here are a couple examples that they gave in the sample. So you can see in the first top example, they're getting a cell line provided. And then in the second example, it's a specific mouse strain that's being provided. So in both cases, there was no effort and they just had an estimated amount. And you see they just briefly described what they're receiving. And once again, I think this is pretty similar to what we currently were doing with our foreign and domestic resources section. It just now needs to be put into this same kind of in-kind format. Couple other things to think about. We also talked about a new addition. So this is another one of the changes. They're now requesting supporting documentation for foreign support or appointments. So we now have to, this is a big change, attach a copy of the contracts specific to foreign appointments and or employment with a foreign institution for all foreign activities and resources that are reported in other support. It's exactly how NIH words it. It's a little bit worded a little weird, but essentially how we're interpreting this is if the PI or key personnel has a foreign appointment or an employment, we have to attach the contract if that is listed in the other support document. So if you were receiving some type of resources or support as part of this appointment, then we also have to include a copy of the contract. Now, they do state that they have to be in English. So if they're not in English, you must provide a translated copy. So if they're not, sorry, that they have to be in English. If they're not in English, you must provide a translated accept machine read translations They will not be providing any funding for these translations, but we do need to provide them. And they do specify, though, this does not include personal service contracts and employment contracts for fellows that are supported by foreign entities. It's only when the PI or key personnel or the person whose other support we're working on has a foreign appointment that we need to include these copies. In many cases, these are sometimes outside activities. Once again, if you do have one of these outside activities, these do typically need to be reported in the OAT system, the outside activity tracking system. And I believe they will also request a copy of these appointments. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I do know they sometimes do. So really, this is the responsibility of the PI to provide these contracts and to provide the translation if required from an official translated source. And then the other new addition is signature of each of the PDPI and the senior key personnel. And so that means for their individual other support. So when we're submitting a just in time, we need other support for everybody. They just signed their own individual other support document. When they sign it, they're signing their respective other support prior to submission. This includes mentor and co-mentors on mentored career awards. The signature certifies that the statements are true, complete, and accurate. And that gets submitted. Important thing to keep in mind when we're doing these, NIH requests a flattened PDF to be submitted to them. But so please, if you're sending, when you're, we'll get it submitted in the timeline and responsibilities, but when the department sends these to Office of Sponsored Research, ideally you'll be sending them as flattened, but please make sure they're not locked or secured. Office of Sponsored Research is going to have to combine the PDFs from multiple key personnel into one packet. So please make sure they've kind of been flattened before you send to OSR. And the application and recipients must maintain the original electronic signature and make it available upon request. That's NIH policy that I'm quoting. Here at UCSF, we're going to leave it up to the departments to determine the best practice of kind of keeping those original electronic copies in case it's requested. We believe that this is just a temporary thing until we're going to talk a little bit more about how they're aiming to get other support moved into Science CV. So while they're using this kind of Word template, we do need to keep a copy of the original electronic versions before it's flattened. So I just previewed this, but let's talk about kind of what's the best practice timeline. So really starting with the department division, adding any pending support that's going to be provided by OSR, the Office of Sponsored Research, since we're doing the pending, we'll still be providing that pending activity. We are working on updating kind of our email templates to kind of match the new requirements. So stay tuned for that. It's up to the department and division kind of now how you're doing it. I think as a reminder in the service partnership agreement, it really kind of detailed out that the departments are the kind of owners of other support. As part of that, you help fill out the effort and cost for each award. You'll kind of know what the current amounts are more than we will in pre-award. Kind of review for any potential overlap in effort or in scientific, and then send to the PI to review. It's really up to them to review the other support content to make sure it's correct, provide any outside UCSF support. If they have one of these, in-kind support where they, it's not through the kind of UCSF appointment, or they have one of those kind of separate support through another entity, nobody here at UCSF is necessarily going to know about those. And so really it's on the PI's shoulders to make sure they're providing any of that information to the department so that they can be added to the other support. Also, same thing for contracts. If it's an outside contract with a foreign entity that did not go through UCSF, we're not going to have access to those contracts. So that really is the responsibility of the PI to provide those. They also need to identify any scientific overlap and then, of course, sign the other support page. Department or division convert to PDF. make sure you're saving the original, send to OSR. OSR is going to review for compliance with effort and sponsor requirements, combine a PDF from all the key personnel and submit to the sponsor. And then we'll be uploading a final packet of what got submitted into eProposal. So it's documented there. All right, so let's go back, because I think one of the biggest questions I think of doing other support and doing the biosketch is knowing what needs to be included and what doesn't. So we're going to go back to our scenarios that we looked at for the biosketch, and now we're going to think about them for the other support component and what should be included on other support. So same scenario, Dr. Chen is a consultant for the women's US soccer team, advising on concussion protocols, separate from the research she conducts at UCSF, and there's no research activities related to the consulting agreement. Does this belong on other support? If yes, which section? As a reminder, we previously did say it belonged on the biosketch in the position, scientific appointments, and honors section. So now I'm going to launch the next poll. Does it belong in other support? If you say yes, does it go into the project proposal section, or does it go in the in-kind contribution section? Okay. Majority of you said no. It was interesting too, because I watched it in real time, and like there were some people who were very quick to get no. So no was definitely in the lead. And then as people thought about like, oh, maybe, and then we got more yeses. So I thought that was fun. I'm going to agree with the no's and say, no, this does not need to go on other support. This is not related to research. It's completely a separate consulting agreement. So no, only thing that needs to go on other support is if it's related to a research endeavor. There's no research with this. They're just a straight consultant. I think this really emphasized the idea that the biosketch really should be more encompassing of all positions. Like really everything needs to go on the biosketch. But the other support really only needs to be included if it has a research kind of component. Okay. Reminder, it still should probably go to OATS, and it still might need to go to conflict of interest depending on what the agreements and stuff are. And this is from FAQ number 15. Okay. Let's adjust the scenario a little bit. Still Dr. Chen, she's still consulting on the concussion protocols, but now, in addition to that, she's receiving de-identified data that she can use in her research that she conducts at UCSF. Is that going to change your answer? So let's relaunch the poll and see if that changes your answer. Okay, majority of you said yes as in kind. I'm going to agree with you on that. Because there's no dollar amount to it, it's just the data kind of being received. That's why I have it in kind. If this is though data that's kind of coming through UCSF and helping with the UCSF research, then there should probably be some type of data use agreement in place, and that would need to be reviewed by the industry contracts division of OSR. If for some reason she's receiving this de-identified data and it's separate from her research at UCSF, then potentially it wouldn't be reviewed by UCSF. It would still need to go on in kind. And then that would still probably outside activity. And I would imagine they might have issues with that if it's a similar research to what she does at UCSF. But just keep in mind, yeah, if there's independent of it going through UCSF, if she's receiving some type of material, data, anything that helps with research, then yes, it needs to go on the other support, independent if it goes through UCSF or not. Right, let's look at another example. Dr. Aziz has a postdoctoral scholar, James Gordon, working in his lab. James Gordon has a stipend and living expenses paid by his home institution, Dresden Technical University in Germany. Dr. Gordon is working on one of the research projects in collaborations with others in Dr. Aziz's lab. Does this belong on Dr. Aziz's other support? If yes, which section? This is a real mixed bag of people. The majority did say yes, in-kind contribution, but that kind of barely won out. I'm going to agree, though, with the majority that yes, it belongs in the in-kind section. The reason why the in-kind section and not the project proposal section is because this is not Dr. Gordon's other support. If it was his other support, it would go into project and proposal. This is Dr. Aziz's other support, so it's not a project and proposal. It's not an award to Dr. Aziz. It's an award or a fellowship or whatever it is to Dr. Gordon, and it's just supporting Dr. Aziz's research. The reason why this needs to be included is because it's supporting the research projects that's in Dr. Aziz's lab. So it's his research endeavors. Dr. Aziz's research efforts are being contributed to by the postdoc, Dr. Gordon. So because it's contributing to the kind of Dr. Aziz's research endeavors, that's why it needs to be included on his other support as in kind. This is the case where it's like a visiting student. They're receiving their own funds from their home institution. It needs to be included on Dr. Aziz's other support. Okay.
Kathy?
Yes.
Well, what if Dr. Gordon is not supported by anybody? Is not being paid by anyone?
What do you mean he's not being paid by anybody? He's just volunteering?
Yeah, that's a question.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't be a postdoctoral scholar then, because all postdoctoral scholars have to be paid at UCSF, that they have a union, but he could be a visiting volunteer. Yes. Yeah, that would have to be added. If there's somebody here, I mean, that's like free labor for Dr. Aziz. We all should be so lucky, right? To have people who are willing to volunteer and give up their time and work in our lab. Yeah. And then in the in-kind section, you would indicate that they're not receiving any support, but the estimated value of that would still be how much you would have to pay a person to be working in your lab. So yeah, if you're having somebody working in your lab who's not being paid anything, but they're supporting the research, then yes, definitely that has to be on the in-kind. Thank you, Joyce. Sorry, it took me a second to wrap my head around what the scenario was, but for sure, if they're volunteering, not paid, still needs to be included. Okay, let's do another scenario with Dr. Gordon. Oh, I forgot. Here's a sample. It's kind of based on one of the examples they have in their sample. I just wanted to show you what it looked like for the in-kind section. I haven't done this for every scenario, but for this one. So there's no effort because they're kind of on a stipend. They don't have any specific effort, but there's a value amount, and it just describes what the contribution is. And they did have examples like this on NIH's sample. So FYI. In fact, I may have pulled this directly from there. All right, so now another example with Dr. Aziz, same Dr. Gordon, but now his stipend and living expenses are being paid by American Heart Association fellowship. And in this case, he has a unique project that's just his own, and Dr. Aziz is just providing guidance to Dr. Gordon. So in this case, Dr. Gordon is not contributing to kind of an overall research project. He has his own little project not little, maybe it's an amazing project, but the postdoc is working on his own unique project, and all Dr. Aziz is doing is providing guidance. Does this still belong on Dr. Aziz's other support? All right, the majority of you said no. It would not belong on other support, and then a little bit for each of the others. Once again, I agree with the majority that no, if the relationship is solely a mentor-mentee arrangement with no research activities, it's not a resource and does not need to be reported. This is from NIH Other Support FAQ number 20. I think when they say here with no research activities, they're referring to like Dr. Aziz has no research activities. I do feel like this statement, it could be interpreted in slightly different ways. So this is the question we have asked for clarification from the NIH policy people. We have not heard back yet. We will share that out when we do. But the way we're interpreting it right now is that if, the money, their support that's supporting the postdoc is for kind of their own research project, or it's kind of unique to them. It's not contributing to the overall research project of the PI. If the PI has kind of no research activities involved, if they're solely kind of acting as a mentor-mentee, then no, it does not need to be included. If the postdoc or fellow or visiting scholar or unpaid volunteer, whoever it is, you know, contributing to the overall research of the lab and it's a larger project, then yes, maybe it should be listed. If it really gets down to whether or not it's a mentor-mentee arrangement, and if they're contributing to the research endeavors of their mentor. If it's contributing to the research endeavors of the mentor, then it should be included. If it's not, and it's kind of separate and all the mentor is doing is advising, then no, it does not need to be included. That's how we're distinguishing it right now. So this gets back to that F32 question. I think in many cases in F32, they're in that mentor-mentee arrangement, then no, it does not need to be included. But once again, we're asking for some clarification, and hopefully we'll get that. I think for now, if it's kind of truly a fellowship where they're training the student and they have their own kind of little mini research project that's kind of unique, then no. If they are large projects that multiple students or multiple people in the lab are working on and there's complete overlap and it also contributes to the PI's kind of overall research endeavors, as they call them, then yes. All right, let's look back at that CZ BioHub investigator that we had before. So remember, they had a joint appointment and they received startup funds. Does this belong on the other support? If yes, which section? Oops, I thought I had my reminder. We said yes to Biosketch. I just gave away the answer, so maybe I won't. I'm not going to do the poll since I just gave away the answer. But yes, should be in kind. Sorry, I thought I had another thing. Why do I say this? Because earlier I said startup funds do not need to be included. But now I'm saying yes. It's because from the NIH FAQ number 16, they do specifically say that it's only startup funds provided by the applicant organization do not need to be included in other support. If there's a startup package from outside the organization, then that must be included in other support. So if this, so Dr. Anderson, if she's got a joint appointment and while she receives kind of additional startup funds that's outside, since that's not UCSF, we're the applicant organization. If CZ BioHub is providing those startup funds, then yes, it does need to be included in other support. So they really draw that line in the FAQs. Additionally, if she's receiving some other type of support from CZ BioHub, that also might need to be included in the in-kind. If she's receiving lab space, if she's receiving personnel to help with the project, kind of anything that, once again, contributes to research, even if it's not research conducted at UCSF, it's research that's conducted at the BioHub, it still needs to be included because they're not worried about an individual's research endeavors just here at UCSF. They want to know about all of their research endeavors. So all of them need to be included. Right. Next, back to Dr. Jackson. We had him earlier too, who's visiting has a visiting lecture position at Peking University. So in this case, just going to give a few lectures on the general state of research, so not about his own specific research, just generally in, the body of research for ALS. It's covered. Does this need to be on other support? If yes, this is where I had the reminder where we said it belonged on the Biosketch. So does this one belong on other support? And if yes, which section? Okay, we got a real mixed results on this one too. Majority said no, but there was a fairly 35% that said yes in kind. And once again, I'm going with the majority. No, because this is not research related. So we're giving lectures, but it's about kind of general research, not their own specific research endeavors. They're not doing any research over there. It's not related to their research efforts. It truly is a visiting lecture. They're going to go give some lectures. So that does not have to go on other support, still belongs on the Biosketch, does not belong on the other support because no research efforts. Let's change the scenario a tiny bit. And now, in addition to traveling over there to give 3 lectures a year, they also provide him lab space while he's there. And while he's there, he can collaborate with other researchers at Peking University. This is separate from the research he conducts at UCSF. It is not supported by any kind of funds that go through UCSF, but while he's there, they give him lab space, maybe they give him a lab tech or even just lab space to kind of work on research while he's there. Does this belong on other support? If yes, which section? Okay. Majority of you, 80% said yes in kind. I agree. Now we are talking about actual research. Lab space supports the research effort. NIH specifically calls out lab space as potential in kind. So yes, definitely in kind. As a reminder, this also almost most definitely needs to be reported in OATS as outside activity, and also might need to be reported probably as conflict of interest. So just keep all of those things in mind, especially if you're a researcher or faculty on the call, that really you need to be thinking about kind of all these different scenarios when you're reporting information. And this was from NIH Other Support FAQ number 26. All right, so those are our little scenarios. I have a couple more slides and then we'll open up the floodgates for questions. One of the other things that they changed was to submit updated other support if undisclosed support is discovered. That's a little bit of a mouthful. I probably could have worded that better. So they require immediate notification of undisclosed other support. So if the PI or other senior personnel on an active NIH grant failed to disclose other support information during just-in-time or RPPR, we need to submit that right away to the GMS. So we have to submit updated support to the grants management specialist named in the notice of award as soon as possible. That will need to go through the Office of Sponsored Research, where the official representatives that contact it, but anybody really could discover this on a undisclosed. So if the PI realizes later, oh, I probably should have included this. If the departments discover something when they're reviewing, outside activity, I'm not quite sure how much department administrators review that, but if you do, or you are having conversations with your faculty and they mention something about an outside activity and you think, oh, that probably should be on other support. If, an RSC is having a conversation and they hear about it, I think this really needs to be a university-wide. If anybody notices something and it was not previously disclosed, then we kind of have to start that process. All groups need to be involved. The department needs to be involved to kind of help update the other support. PI needs to be involved to provide all the proper information and re-sign the other support. Office of Sponsored Research is going to be involved to help submit that to the GMS and provide updated information. So really this is just NIH has really kind of specified now what the process is. In fact, this has happened before where we're like, oh, we have something we think we were supposed to disclose. What's the process? So really here, they're just giving us the process. It's just submitting it to your GMS as soon as possible with updated other support. So you don't wait until the next RPPR. You don't wait until the next just in time. As soon as something is discovered, it gets updated and submitted. And then finally, I just want to mention that currently other support is not available in Science CV for NIH. It is for NSF, but not for NIH. They are working on it. So they anticipate the other support template will be available in sometime 2022. And the current Word other support template is really just interim until that template is available. So we are kind of anticipating that they're going to either require or strongly enforce using the Science CV to complete other support. We're hoping that's going to have a signature component so the PIs can just sign it within the system. What though that looks like and what it'll be is still unknown at this time. Few FAQs just that really, I made these up. I haven't been frequently asked these, but I thought might be. So what if you're not sure something should be included on the Biosketch or other support? I think I mentioned this earlier. NIH recommends, in interest of full transparency, to err on the side of caution and to disclose it. Are there still two different versions of Other Support? I think I've mentioned this already. We used to have one for Just in Time and one for RPPR. That has gone away. However, they did emphasize in the FAQs that the RPPR still only requires submission of Other Support if there's been a change since the last year, or if there's any new senior key personnel added. So that part has not changed, but you do need to use the new format if you are having to submit Other Support. And does the Academic Senate 95% rule still apply with the new NIH format? So this is an internal UCSF guideline, and yes, that still applies. For those of you who are not familiar, the Academic Senate appointment is that just be aware of certain appointment types, clinical teaching, and they have other requirements. And so effort may be capped at 95% or 11.4 calendar months to allow time for those other activities. So most all in residence faculty, if you're an adjunct professor, but you're actively applying for a grant, so that quarter you also have to have some reserve time. So just keep that in mind when we're filling out the Other Support. Well, NIH is going to be looking to see for over 12 calendar months. Internally, we should be thinking about that 11.4 calendar months to make sure we are still in guidelines with the Academic Senate 95% rule. Here are some Other Support resources. The Other Support page, NIH's page, has instructions in samples and the blank format. They have the FAQs. We'll add it to our other, we already have links to it on our Other Support page, and we'll be adding additional information. I'm going to put the recording of this training up on the Other Support page once we get it cleaned up. And also you can find more information about the 95% rule on our website. Please make sure you're staying informed. If you're not already on the OSR Announce listserv, you should try to get on it. Email us at OSR.info and indicate you want to be added to the OSR Announce listserv. When we learn about additional changes to the policies, we always announce it through that listserv. And also a reminder, we have 2 Q&A sessions coming up. One on May 11th, one on May 26th, just if you have any additional questions or after you start working on the templates, if you come up with questions, feel free. If these are popular or if we feel we need them, we can do more of these Q&A sessions kind of later in the year, especially as we get closer to the January enforcement. Not that I'm suggesting you wait until January to start using these new formats. I do recommend you kind of at least start the process of transitioning over. But once again, they're not going to enforce it until January 2022. And then just a reminder of the learning objectives we went over today. Oh, and I didn't mean to have this. Just have them up. We talked about the changes. How does it relate to the OSR template format? Understanding what documentation needs to be attached for foreign appointments. We did what type of support should be included, the different sections. Hopefully you found those polls and case scenarios somewhat helpful to be thinking about where things need to go in which document, what's the internal process for UCSF, having to get the signatures, and finally knowing your resources. And then feel free to contact us. The 3 of us of the training team, we monitor the OSR info box. That's really the best way to make sure you kind of will get a response from one of us because we rotate monitoring that. You're also welcome to reach out. And then if you just want to know who your OSR staff is assigned to your department or division, you can also find that on your website. So I will turn it over to Cassie now.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions, and I have a proposal because there are so very many, and a lot of them I feel we've actually addressed as you've gone through. So my proposal is that you, Joyce, and I go through the questions afterwards and get them all put together in a good way, and then find a way to post them with this video of today's session. And then we could also use it to inform our Q&A sessions that we're going to do in the future, because there are so very many. If that's acceptable to you, I would like to do that. I can go through and try to see if there's a few we can pull out that we got in early, but I just want to say there's a lot, and I know there's no way we're going to get to all of these.
So we will definitely answer all the questions that came in. We will download the copy of the chats So we have that so that we can answer.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you all for joining us. So we will end here since we already are 15 minutes over. Thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for more from all of us.
And we will get everything on the website. So you'll get the answers to the Q&A online and everything.